Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we have our usual roundup of the main stories affecting the Sikh community around the world. And as news comes out from California that Governor Newsom has vetoed Bill SB 509, that hugely important tool in the fight against India's transnational repression, we'll take a look at the reaction from across the community and all the usual suspects celebrating as the dangerous forces of Hindutva remind us once again that the fight for Khalistan has just become more important than ever. Well, all this and more on today's show. But joining me, as always, is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there. Take in a last look. This weekend, the backdrop will be changing because, Thanksgiving here in Canada is over. So enjoy it while you can. But other than that, thanks for tuning in for another episode with us. And don't forget to send in your comments. And again, stick around to the end of the show to see what comments made it onto the program today. Back to you, Angus.
Indeed. Well, we'll be sad to see the backdrop go. But today, in the meantime, James and I will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And do stay tuned for the end of the show when, of course, we'll take a look at loads of great comments which have been pouring in. So thank you, as always, for those. Right, James, let's get underway. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
We're going to take a look at two stories tonight just because they are a bit longer. So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't cutting into your stories, Angus, and make sure that we stayed on schedule for a change.
That would be nice.
But in any event, we're going to take a look at how private corporations are running not just the prisons and the jails in the US, but also these new ICE detention facilities and how they've monetized the communication systems that actually works against those in detention. Only one state in the US offers free phone calls for the inmates or detainees, whether that is in ICE facilities or in the regular prison system. Now, there are companies making millions upon millions of dollars each year in addition to the money that they kick back to the facilities. Essentially what happens is that the phone companies, these private corporations, go in and install the systems, and then they give a kickback of anywhere between $1 and $20 million, depending on the facility, the size, and the number of inmates. But they give a kickback to the state or the facility. Now, the problem here is that, of course, they have to make that money somewhere. They have monopolized and monetized the simple act of calling family or friends. Why is this a big concern, many people ask? Well, let's explain it. They've also introduced video calls. They've introduced messaging. They've introduced screened emails. So they still are screened for any nefarious communications, but at a very high cost. In some of the facilities, a 15-minute phone call can cost as much as $21 and change. Now, that may not seem like much, but if you figure that you're trying to gather all of your documentation for an immigration hearing or for different processes, then that becomes a huge expense that many people cannot afford. It also becomes a huge expense when you start adding in long distance calls. And that could be for people who are stuck in the immigration limbo that may not have people in the US. Maybe they have to contact people overseas in order to get documentation or just to let them know where they are at. So this, as I said, has become you're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars a year in the systems. Now, of course, it's a captive market. They are going after vulnerable people. They do not have alternatives, except when it comes to kicking over to the black market or what they call contraband. And that is when cell phones and mobile phones with data or otherwise are snuck into the institutions by inmates or even by some guards. Now, this turns around and creates not only a problem when it comes to communications, but also there is payment that is made to one inmate from another to use those phones. If that payment is not made, then violence is pretty much given at that point. So it's going to contribute to the violence within the facilities. It also creates a security risk because of the fact that the guards at the ICE centers or at jails and prisons, there could be communications going on with other facilities, and this could be joint riots, it could be, inmate actions, it could be escape attempts, it could be harassing witnesses and making threats to scare witnesses off. These are all concerns of this phone market. However, let's try to focus on the immigration point and how this impacts a lot of people. Now, when you're looking at the gross revenues and the commissions that some of the facilities are getting are up to 42%. That's an average of the gross revenue generated from the prisoners' calls, siphoning over $143 million a year from the pockets of families and going into state agencies. That's not including the corporate profits and all of the expenses and everything else. Now, when you look at the data end, the annual kickback amounts are reaching 9.8 million in Michigan, 8.2 million in Arizona, 8 million in Georgia, 6.7 million in Texas, and it goes on and on. And these, remember that people who are new arrivals, whether they are refugees, whether they are seeking asylum, whether they are legal immigrants that have been caught up accidentally or inadvertently in the system, or, as we reported last night, a gentleman who innocently was carrying a bottle of opium perfume. And when you look at this, the average income of someone, and I don't know the numbers for immigration, but let's go to the jail for a second in terms of the average income. The average income before incarceration for an American in the jail system was less than $12,000 a year. So this shows that these $20 individual phone calls can definitely create a real block to the legal system and gathering evidence, documents, and so forth, or witness statements and all of that. When it comes to families that are making less than $12,000 a year. Now the family is dependent on one income because the individual that is in detention for immigration, potentially being thrown out of the country, that is a big problem. And that, again, creates more hardship on the families that are on the outside, especially when it comes to keeping those relationships strong between husbands and wives, or wives and husbands, and the children and parents and all of that. It is a horrific thing to monetize the communication between parents and children or other family members, but also to block them from being able to represent themselves or to assist in their own legal defense to remain in the country. This, again, has become a major talking point for a lot of politicians. And as such, the FCC did create a system in which they were going to limit what these facilities or these private corporations could actually charge. However, with that said, the program was blocked, or at least really gone after in terms of the lobbying by these corporations and others who are making billion-dollar profits off the private prison and detention centers. Now, even with that, you look at the one company here as an example, Ventive and Securus. They are making apparently $767.5 million in 2020 alone, and that's gone up since then. So that shows the kind of money and why they are lobbying the government to postpone any type of limits on the cost for communications. And this was successful. They are now putting off, the FCC that is putting off these caps till 2027 with a review before any changes are implemented. Therefore, the companies are able to continue to gouge the inmates and the families. And this is just wrong. It is, again, just really putting a block on people trying to defend themselves, especially in this time that ICE is definitely making mistakes. They are picking up people who shouldn't be incarcerated or detained at times, and that is a problem, and it just gets exacerbated. Now, not only is this an unfair system for the detainees, but at the end of the day, it's a really unfair system for taxpayers and the immigration system, as well as ICE budgets that Trump has allocated. Because at the end of the day, everybody that's in there that doesn't belong there, they are costing taxpayers and the U.S. budget every single day that they are detained without reason or without grounds. And again, it's you can say, well, they're illegals or whatever, but and keep in mind that there are some people that are getting mixed up in the system that are not, that have come into the country or come into the US properly and with all papers and maybe a small clerical error or something. But again, not something that rationalizes the high expense to the taxpayers and the US government, and they are not a threat. But again, it also really impacts the family dynamics, especially if children are young and impressionable and they lose a parent all of a sudden and they don't understand why it is that daddy can't call or mommy can't call them, or that they've only got a few minutes on the phone. And, like, I could give you a million different reasons why I think this is cruel, but at the same time, it is also a system that if they were to go the other way, where there is a prison that has made phone calls free, the problem is that there are limited phones in the facilities. Now, this has created already with the paid system where there's actual violence just over the use of the phone, because one inmate may take exception that one person is talking to their family too long. And a fight will break out because there's limited time available to use those phones. If they're free, then you're going to have this even further, because now it's not a limit of who's got the money to make a call today. Now it becomes the phones are free. I'm going to talk as much as I want, as often as I want, and to heck with anybody else in this facility that wants to use that phone. So again, there has to be some type of controls and balance, but at the same time, there has to be a humanity about it, and there has to be an ability for people to fight their cases and have access to information. So with that said, they're also now monetizing other things such as text messaging. They are text for reading documents, like they could get an ebook, and they're getting paid in some facilities. They have to pay for each minute they're reading. I mean, it's just gotten ridiculous in terms of the gouging of inmates and detainees. Here it shows that in one of the facilities, up to $17 for a 15-minute phone call. And what other complaints come in is that these phone calls are more expensive for the initial connection, or they get the 15-minute call and it's a block. If the call drops, well, that 15 minutes is lost. They have to start from zero and get billed another $15 or $17 for another 15-minute block. So it shows how the system is stacked against those who need it the most. And those are people with lower income. And again, a lot of times the people who cannot afford to have high-priced lawyers to fight their immigration are the ones that are getting stuck in the middle of this. And it has to be changed. But again, it's been delayed until 2027. That will give them time to push back and to probably make changes. And I'm just guessing, because it is such a cash cow, that they will find a sympathetic ear that will allow them to make those changes in the favor of the telecoms, not in favor of the inmates, unfortunately. Now, in closing on that, I just wanted to point out as well the difference in terms of the numbers. Now, the median cost is what I'm using here across the US, and that is $12.10 for a 15-minute call. And when you look at mobile phones, still the same, and then rates could reach up to $22 in some Michigan jails. That's the highest level. And I just wanted to show in contrast where you're looking at. Now, the FCC caps, we're going to bring that down to 90 cents. And that is what has been postponed until 2027. In the UK, for that, you'd be looking at $1.52, or I guess 1.52 pounds, as it may be. The darn currencies. And then again, it just shows the difference rates on the screen there. In Canada, you're looking at about 74 cents or $1 Canadian. So again, looking at it from the standpoint, it shows the way in which they are really using the most vulnerable, again, to make these massive, massive profits. In Australia, you're looking at 25 cents Australian, and yeah, the first call is free, then reduced rates. So again, it just goes to show the disparity in terms of how it works. In Germany, it's just fair market values. Whatever the public pays for phone service or a phone call, that's what they pay. So again, it just shows how that is. And don't forget that in Canada, they also have a $2.50 connection fee just for making that call. So that is why I think that there is a real challenge, and it's stacked against detainees to try and fight those challenges that they see in the prisons or the detention centers to bring it forward. Now, we're running low on time here, so I'm just going to cover this next story very quickly here, Angus. And because we cover a lot of the bad news stuff or the important news that happens to be a bit more depressing, I thought we would take a quick peek at how the Pentagon is going to be missing out if they continue with Pete Hegseth's desire to have people remove beards and turbans and other pieces of religious items. Now, I'm going to go back to actually 1971, and that was the year I was actually born. So I was only a couple of months old when this event happened, but it really shows the huge benefit that is had by any military when it comes to bringing the Sikhs on board. And this was the story of the final flight of Nirmaljit Singh Sekhon. Now, he was facing an attack that was happening during the war in 1971, and there were 6 other fighter jets that were coming, or fighter planes. I guess they weren't super jets at that time, but he was facing 6 of them. He courageously guarded the airbase and won that battle. Unfortunately, he is one of the only and the last person to receive such an amazing level of honor from the government, and that was looking back at that time until even currently today, where he was awarded, and I apologize, I forgot the name of the award here. Let me just scroll back up. I apologize for that. But in any event, it is an honor that was bestowed upon him because of his bravery and his willingness to be dedicated to anything that came at him. He did not back down. And that's why he was called the Flying Officer. Now, of course, we know that the fierce conflict that was going on between Pakistan and India at that time was a bloodbath. It was a horrible thing, and the 6 Pakistani F-86 Sabre jets from the 26th Squadron had taken off to basically take out an entire base, and that is where he was awarded the highest medal. And the Param Chakra was the decoration. My apologies that I forgot that. But I wanted to just demonstrate that even going back in history, you can find records of the most amazing and brave fighters in military history outside of the U.S., inside of the U.S. It doesn't matter where you look. Now, we can go all the way back to World War I when the first Sikh enrolled and enlisted to fight on behalf of the Allied forces. This is a history that goes even beyond that. And when you're looking back at the battles in the 1800s, the British recognized the Sikh soldiers as a formidable force because they were the most aggressive and the toughest warriors and soldiers that they had ever faced. And that's why the British were so excited afterwards to be able to bring the Sikhs into that entire squad and to bring them into the British military because of that bravery and that dedication, that resilience, and the desire to make sure that they protect what is right and what is theirs. So again, it just really shows what the U.S. can be missing out on if they continue to forward this new policy, or really going back to old policy. Now, here I'm just going to scroll through quickly as we wrap up here and just give you a quick overview of accommodations that have been made. And of course, we've talked about this in the past, so I don't think we need to spend too much time. But at the same time, I just wanted to point out more or less what other nations are permitting. Now, in the UK, they're permitted in orders of dress, and that would be looking at the turbans, and that is worn under a helmet, or if they're not wearing a helmet, then they pick out certain colors and certain ones that go with the rank or with their division. And again, it is different things are acceptable, and that would be the 5Ks, including the kirpan, that is permitted, and they wear that under the uniform. And then again in Canada, they are permitted to wear the turbans, but they are either navy blue, rifle green, or light blue. And again, for each service branch is how they decide. Permitted in terms of other religious items, and that is as long as they are not going to jeopardize any safety of the mission or the individual. So as long as that is covered, then they are okay. And when it comes to other areas, they are allowed, such as the kirpan is allowed, or kirtan is allowed up to 23 centimeters. Again, underneath their uniform, of course, sheath. That kind of goes without saying. And Australia, again, they allow the 5Ks, including the kirpan, are permitted. And again, different dress colors. And the manual provides not only the color of the turban that can be worn, but also the placement of the badge or insignia of their branch or division. And so again, I just wanted to bring that up because I thought it was very important for us to cover, Angus, in the fact that this is what they could be going forward with in terms of exception to the different uniform codes, to the new, what they call the personal hygiene policy or facial hair policy. And yeah, it's not, as Hegseth called them, beardos. It's a fact of respecting religious rights as well as freedoms there, while being able to recruit amazing potential recruits into the military, whether it's the Air Force, the Marines, it doesn't matter what level or what branch. They could potentially miss out on amazing soldiers moving forward.
Indeed, and I chuckled to myself when in the table saying the kirpan, is the kirpan allowed to be worn? Don't forget, these are soldiers who are carrying around 5.56 high caliber weapons. Oh, you can carry your rifle, but you're not allowed to carry a kirpan. God forbid you can actually carry a sword with you. But anyway, that's another issue. But yes, I mean, the military, we talk a lot about Sikhs in the military, and certainly I've served myself, so I've got a vested interest certainly in the British military. And we have a huge, wonderful history with the Gurkhas. It's very well known. It's a very, very similar story to that of the Sikhs. It was the British came up against the Gurkhas and so impressed with their military prowess that we invited them into the British Army, and they have served with massive distinction ever since. And of course, they have become one of the most popular regiments in the British Army. So why isn't the same situation with the Sikhs? But primarily because the Sikhs don't have their own regiment, even though their story is exactly the same as the Gurkhas. So the British people, generally speaking, are not aware of this huge military history and heritage that Sikhs have with the British Army. It's a hugely wonderful, noble, pride-filled history, and yet it is not widely enough known. And that's something that I believe can only be changed with the establishment of a Sikh regiment, something I strongly believe in. But anyway, that's another issue. But yes, the whole beard issue, I mean, well, let's not go over old ground. We talked about this a lot, and we hope that common sense will prevail. I do believe it will prevail, because Sikhs have served with honour in the US Army, and I have no doubt that somebody is going to have a quiet word with Mr. Hegseth and say, look, mate, you're on the wrong side on this one. So I do believe that will change. So I have faith in common sense prevailing. I just want to jump back. I found this story about the phones actually quite interesting, because this is almost like a parable for humanity. And I'll explain what I mean by this. I'm on to one of my pet subjects here. When I regular watchers of the show know when I talk about the 1 in 10s, is if you put 10 average human beings into a room, there's always one in that room who is genetically programmed. He can't help it, or she, but usually it's he. He cannot help himself but need to control the rest, the other 9 in the room, or to suck all the wealth and resources from everybody else in that room. That's just what he does.
You ever been in a room of women, Angus? Continue on.
That still wouldn't hold him back, you see, because he's genetically programmed. And we can trip off the tongue hundreds of examples of the 1 in 10s. But also in that room, in that room of 10 people, it is a spectrum, and people are of that nature of varying degrees, all the way down to the other extreme, where they are completely selfless and will almost give their everything that they own to the other 9, because that is just, again, the way that they're genetically programmed. And that is humanity in a nutshell. Now, the problem is we as a society, in whichever country on this planet, we have always tried to find a system that works, a system that runs our society. The problem is you're trying to apply one system to a spectrum of human beings. Human nature goes from one extreme to the other in every aspect of human nature. In other words, there is no one human being that is genetically made the same. Thanks to mathematical distribution of genetics, every different possible variation of human being pretty much exists at any given time on this planet. And therefore, you've got the 1 in 10s and you've got the remaining 9 who actually are a different spectrum. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to apply one system to a whole range of people and expect all those people to comply with that one system. Now, why am I sort of going down this weird route? It's because it almost comes down to capitalism versus socialism. Now, the world, generally speaking, is divided between those two sorts of social models. In the West, we tend to follow a capitalistic structure. In the East, Russia, China, they follow this extreme socialism, communism, basically. And they are two poles apart. They're two very different ideologies. Capitalism is all about, and this feeds into the 1 in 10, it's all about making money. It gives an incentive to every individual to make money. Now, because if you make money, you're rewarded, you get a better standard of living, your life improves, etc., generally speaking. The problem with that, the pros of that is it creates the most efficient system. It means there is an incentive for everybody to get out there and find the best way to do something, the fastest way, the most efficient way, the best way, because that's what they will get rewarded for. So that moves society forward in the most efficient manner. So in theory, that's great. It goes wrong. The cons of the system, it means it gives an advantage to those who are most greedy because they are ruthless. If you look at your average CEO, for example, they tend to have psychopathic tendencies. They have a ruthlessness. They have a genetic ruthlessness that means that they don't care. They will exploit their fellow human beings. They have no empathy. They have no selfless gene. They are there to build, to create, to make money. That is what drives them. That is what makes great CEOs. And nature has designed that to drive humanity forward. That is how nature works and why human beings have survived and have succeeded. But the cons of that, of course, is that people, the vulnerable, get exploited. Those who are selfless get exploited. That's the downside. And that is exactly what's happened in this system. Now, the opposing side is communism, socialism at its extreme. It's where everybody's treated equal. Everybody shares everything equally, and there is nobody who is richer than anybody else. And there's everybody pitches in, and everybody gets an equal amount back. That's a simple principle. The trouble is that system. Now, the pros of that system speak for themselves. Everybody wins in theory. The downside of that system, it doesn't work because of human nature. There are the 1 in 10s, and in fact, there's several in that same group, in the average group of 10. There are those who still feel the need to exploit, to make a bit more than the others. Some are more equal than others. George Orwell readers will understand that concept. And this is the problem with communism. It doesn't work. It breaks down, as history has proven. It always fails because there are human beings who feel the need, who are genetically driven to want more, to exploit. They have greed built into them. That, unfortunately, is unavoidable. But again, that is human nature. So the problem we have as a human society across the world, whichever country you live in, which system works best? Now, both systems have pros, both systems have cons. Both systems are imperfect. The problem we have as a human society is both systems don't work well. But what we have to do, we have to have one system. So what we have chosen here in the West is one system that we believe it works, is the least worst system. It's not necessarily the best, but it is the least worst. And that's the problem. And coming full circle back to what we're talking about the phones, this is the problem we have, is this is the least worst system. It is better to have a capitalist system where private enterprise brings in the phone system, because that makes it more efficient. In theory, that should actually make it cheaper. That should make it more efficient. It should provide more facilities, the extra add-ons, because that's what the provider gets rewarded for. But it goes wrong. And again, this is why I'm saying it's a perfect parable for what I've been talking about, is because it gets exploited. Because the greedy see this system, they see a captive audience, they say, we can make even more money out of this. Now, if it was a selfless Sikh who was running this system, I've absolutely no doubt that they would be morally bound to ensure that this system doesn't exploit. It does provide what is needed and is rewarded accordingly, but takes no more. Unfortunately, it is driven and run by greedy people who are not controlled by such moral standards. And that is where it goes wrong. And that is clearly what's happened here. Now, what's the alternative? As you rightly said, James, well, let's give it for free. Everybody has equal access to it for free. Again, it doesn't work because the greedy start exploiting it in the system, as you said. And you could reflect this across any scenario in human society, whichever context. It's exactly the same. They're always the 1 in 10s, and then a few like them on that scale, that spectrum scale, who will always exploit that system for their own individual benefit. And that's the problem we have in life, James. And I'm being very philosophical about this, but I say it's one of my pet subjects. And this is why I believe that the best way is always the middle ground. It's that sort of hybrid between the two. And this is always it's this perpetual, this permanent battle between one extreme and the other. Extreme left, extreme right, extreme greed, extreme selflessness. It's somewhere in the middle is the way that works, is the most efficient. But we, the majority, always try to tread the middle path, but all along the way we are pulled in each direction by these genetically driven people on the extremes, and it is up to us just to continue and hope we can tread that it's a thick line in the middle and not fall off either side, James. So there's my philosophical point for the day.
Absolutely, and you're absolutely correct, Angus. I mean, look at Canada. Every time we get a lower cost operator on cell phones just in the regular market, it gets bought up by the big three, Bell, TELUS, Rogers, and it disappears. And that is exactly why, because you've got the big corporations that are filled with these corporate CEOs that just want more and more and more. And when somebody comes out to do it cheaper, they just squash them. And that's the reality of life. Indeed. You're absolutely right there.
Yeah, and conversely, when we look at a communist system, which in theory is the perfect system, it fails, is because it stops these efficiencies building. It means, if I know I'm going to be taken care of, I'm not going to make any effort. And that's why it fails. Again, because human nature, because the lazy amongst us in human society just think, you know what, there's no point. I'm going to get fed anyway. I'm going to have a roof over my house. So I don't need to work. And therefore, the system starts failing because more and more people realise, I don't need to work. So the whole system fails. So again, you can see, sadly, that both systems have their inbuilt flaws. So there is no perfect system. Maybe one day in 1,000 years, human beings will find that perfect system. I doubt it somehow, but anyway, we'll see.
Sadly, Angus, I think we'll destroy the planet before then.
Well,
sad reality.
Maybe, fortunately, we'll be long gone, hopefully, before that day arrives. But anyway, let's move on to more serious matters now. And I'm going to talk about the sad news that came in overnight. Or yesterday, actually, SB 509, Bill SB 509 in California. Yes, this the bill that was being driven by by various organisations in California. It was put to it passed the local assembly, and it was put to Governor Newsom. Gavin Newsom, there's a mouthful. Governor Newsom to sign this bill off. And it was hoped that he would actually sign it. Apologies, I've just closed it. There you go. And unfortunately, Governor Newsom announced yesterday that he will not sign this bill. Here's actually the announcement. On his website, he's a long list of wonderful bills that he's signed. But sadly, if you scroll down, it says the governor also announced that he has vetoed the following bills. SB 509, of course, that was the bill that was promoted by Senator Caballero and, of course, many other people within certainly the Sikh community, Jasmeet Bains being one of them. And yes, sadly, and if you look at the governor's website, he has actually written a formal letter to explain why he has refused to sign this bill. And He says, while I appreciate the author's intent to enhance the state's ability to identify and respond to transnational oppression, the issue is best addressed through an administrative action in coordination with federal agencies. By codifying definitions related to this training, this bill would remove the state's flexibility and ability to avoid future inconsistencies related to the work, especially since no unified federal definition exists. Now, Cal OES, that's the local emergency services, have already developed a training to help law enforcement recognise this. Information about this TNR can be found on the California Specialized Training Institute Criminal Justice webpage, blah, blah, blah. This work was done already in coordination with these organisations. Federal partners also are involved to ensure alignment with national standards and equip local law enforcement with the tools needed to identify and react to the threat. Now, I tried to pick apart this letter, and our audience can obviously find this online if you actually want to read it yourself. It's pretty meaningless. It doesn't really explain. I mean, I think what it's trying to say is, look, if we sign this bill locally in California, it then restricts us in the future should different scenarios come along. And the federal or central government, if they start acting on this as well, we are then restricted by our own local laws. It almost, I mean, it's a very, very thin argument, and to me, it's a completely fabricated argument. In other words, it's complete nonsense. He's had to come up with an excuse why he signed this bill, and it is very clear, and it is very concerning. And I think we should all be very concerned that there is no genuine, solid, concrete reason why he has not signed this bill. We all know why he has not signed this bill is because he has been got to. He has been pressured by Hindutva forces who are clearly extraordinarily powerful, not just in North America, but specifically in California. We do know that these organizations, and of course we all know which organizations these are, they are particularly the Hindu American Foundation, they're particularly the Coalition for North, CONA, Coalition for North, Coalition for North Hindus of North America. I got there in the end, apologies. Anyway, CONA for short. So it's the HAF and it's CONA, who are extremely powerful lobbying forces in North America. They have been lobbying American politics, US politics for a long time on behalf of Hindutva, on behalf of these Hindu extremists. And we do know they have been very, very vocal, very active in campaigning, both publicly and certainly behind the scenes across the whole of American politics. And they have succeeded. They have won this battle. And we should all be concerned by this, because this means that US politics is now being influenced by Indian politics. It is being influenced by an Indian extremist agenda. The Indian nationalists are now influencing US politics. That is serious, and that is very, very significant, and something that America needs to wake up to the fact of what is going on here. Now, unsurprisingly, Ms. Baines, Jasmeet Baines, who was one of the hugely supportive people, powerful politicians locally in California behind this bill, and she's done a huge amount of work, obviously for the Sikh community, but particularly on this bill. And she helped, along with other organisations like the Sikh Coalition and many others, to really push this through. Firstly, the local assembly, to get it successfully signed off by the local assembly, but also to unite all the forces, the supportive forces behind it, to push this right up to Governor Newsom's desk. Now, she's made a statement after the news came out that he has vetoed the bill. She said, the governor rejected legislation to prohibit caste discrimination. This is the bill last year, which we'll talk about in a moment.
Right.
That he also vetoed. Now he has vetoed legislation to protect Californians from transnational oppression. I'm grateful his signature was not required to recognise the 1984 Sikh genocide. There's a sarcastic dig. In other words, it's just as well that he wasn't involved in signing off the acceptance that the genocide of 1984 was in fact what it was, a genocide. She says, the Sikh community has found its voice. We have incredible allies like Senator Caballero, Assemblymember Surya, who proudly stand with us. We finally have a seat at the table and will continue to participate freely in American democracy. Key word there, American democracy. One bill cannot make or break my community. We stand against hate, racism and fear-mongering. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So, she's made it's a very short but very punchy statement, and I think that first paragraph really says it all. In other words, we know your game, Governor Newsom. We know you've been got to and influenced by Hindutva. In other words, it's just as well, you vetoed last year's bill that was prevented the caste system. You vetoed this bill. In other words, whose agenda are you pushing here? It's very clear you're pushing the Hindu extremist agenda. And likewise, it's just as well we didn't need you to sign off the bill to recognise the genocide, because we know, again, you would have refused to even accept what was blatantly staring you in the face. So, in other words, the response is robust, let's just call it. It's angry, it's robust, as it should be. And as I keep saying, the whole community, and not just the whole community, but California needs to wake up to the fact your politics are being influenced now by Indian extremists, these Hindu nationalists. That is what is now dictating your state legislation. Be aware of that, and you should be worried about that. Now, of course, I said in the introduction, celebrations are breaking out amongst the Hindutva bodies, all the entities, Kona, HAF, they're all jumping up and down with excitement because, look, we've just won another victory. Yes, we are now controlling and influencing US politics. Suhag Shukla. Now, this lady, she is the executive director of Hindu American Foundation, yes, the HAF, who, James, yes, you and I, we've talked a lot about in the past. The HAF, this Hindutva-backed organisation that just does nothing else but lobby on behalf of Hindutva, on behalf of these Hindu extremists, to push the Hindutva agenda across North American politics. She, of course, unsurprisingly, has made a statement when the news came out. She said, and she refers to Jasmeet Bains' statement. She said, this Jasmeet Bains' reaction is interesting. It reveals in her equating the SB 509 and caste bill SB 403 veto. Now, again, for those who might not remember, the SB 403 veto was, again, another piece of legislation that was designed to, it was to do with employment law, and it was designed to prevent the caste system being used by employers to discriminate against lower caste Indians. Now, anybody in any common sense would say, of course, that's a good thing. It's, the caste system is inherently evil. It is a system that should not exist in the 21st century, never mind the 20th century. This system should not certainly be present in North America. It shouldn't be there in the United States, and it most certainly should not be used to discriminate in the place of employment. So Bill SB 403 was written and presented and proposed to prevent the caste system being used as a discriminatory tool for upper caste, basically for upper caste Indians, to discriminate against lower caste Indians in the workplace. It got thrown out. Why? Governor Newsom didn't sign. He vetoed that same bill. Why? Because the HAF and Kona, yes, the same old Hindutva suspects, they lobbied powerfully to ensure he didn't sign this bill. So, Suhag Shukla then obviously refers to how Jasmeet Bains herself had helped push these two bills forward. She said it makes sense that she pushed these bills because the 509, the latest attempt, was structured to appeal to and harness this exact same core base angered by last year's failure. For two California politicians with roots in the Indian subcontinent, leftist progressivism was appropriated to implicitly import Indian political third rails, caste and a secessionist movement, the khalistan movement, label opponents as agents and ignore Interpol warnings into California. So basically what she said, and it doesn't actually quite make sense, I don't know what she means by the political third rail, but basically what she's saying is that people like Jasmeet Bains and the Sikh community have used the caste system and the Khalistan campaign and accusing Hindutva and the HAF as being agents of Hindutva and of actually effectively of the Indian government. That she's claiming that's what their argument is. Well, it's true. There is no doubt. We do know that HAF and Kona are effectively agents of the Indian government. They are lobbying on behalf of the Indian government. And they're also lobbying on behalf of Hindutva. And here's another little side issue I discovered yesterday in one of my discussions. The name Shukla, and I'm sure somebody in our audience will correct me if I'm wrong, but apparently the name Shukla is a Brahmin name. Oh, what a surprise! A Brahmin trying to protect the caste system. Yes, the Brahmin's the upper caste. It's a Brahmin upper caste trying to protect the system that keeps her as upper caste. What a surprise. Interestingly also, I also discovered again that I think the president or the founder of the other organisation, Kona, and that's the Coalition for North American Hindus, whatever. The founder of Kona is a guy called Trivedi. And apparently, I also heard that Trivedi is allegedly another Brahmin name. Oh, look, so the Brahmins are trying to protect the system that keeps the Brahmins in power. What a surprise. Yes, I mean, there you go again. So I need to say no more about that. You can all draw your own conclusions. And then, again, how has the Indian media covered it? Well, who would be surprised? The Indian media likewise are gleeful. They're rubbing their hands in absolute joy and celebration. Our good old friend, the Times of India, who always, and again, this always is, to me, is a bit of a bellwether, because the Times of India is supposedly one of the more serious sort of outlets, news outlets of India. But it just can't help itself. And it goes on about the Coalition of North America, CONA, welcomed Newsom's decision to veto the bill. The group argued that despite months of engagement with the bill's author, SB 509 remained divisive, duplicative and expensive, warned that its vague definitions could be weaponised against vulnerable diaspora communities. Well, again, once again, it comes back to this deep hypocrisy. Is that their argument was saying this bill will discriminate against Hindus. And yet, in the same sentence, it says it's vague definitions. Well, how can it discriminate against Hindus specifically if the definitions, by your own words, are vague? In other words, this bill was designed deliberately to be vague, so it is non-discriminatory against any single minority. It can be applied to every minority. And yet, again, we have this sort of paradoxical argument, this nonsense argument, where they're saying one thing, but actually the truth is the other. And you can't have vague definitions and then in the same breath say, well, it discriminates against us. But that's what they're trying to say. In other words, their arguments just don't make sense. And it continues, for instance, Californian Hindus opposing the vandalisation of their neighbourhood mandir could be labelled as proxies of the Indian government, the organisation said. 21 Assembly members abstained, dozens of civic groups and elected leaders signed a coalition letter urging the governor to reject it. Well, again, we all know why that coalition lobbied to reject it is because they're all pushing the Hindutva agenda. But it's interesting, one point that comes out of here is this narrative that they're creating, and this is a very consistent narrative that CONA and HAF have been pushing and been using as part of their toolkit to lobby politicians. They are saying that Hindus are victims. Hindus are the victims of this. They are the victims of Sikh bullying, Sikh harassment, Sikh attacks even violent attacks. They claim that these wretched Khalistani terrorists are victimising Hindus. Hindus are the victims. It's this whole narrative of victimisation. And again, you can see, even in this quote here, for instance, California Hindus opposing the vandalisation of their neighbourhood mandir could be labelled as proxies of the Indian government. And they're saying, well, look, we're victims. Our mandirs are being vandalised. And if we try and stand up and complain about it, we're now being accused of being agents of the Indian government. And again, the whole argument just falls apart because let's apply some facts here. The Indian diaspora, the Hindu diaspora in US is 4 million. The diaspora of Sikhs is a fraction of that. And yet you're claiming that the Sikhs are victimising the Hindu population. Well, if that is true, then it doesn't say very much for the Hindu population if 4 million of you are being victimised by a tiny minority. In other words, man up and stand up if you're that weak. So sadly, but again, the truth is obvious. It's absolute nonsense. There's only one party that is the victim in this. We all know which party that is, and we know which party is the aggressor in this. And I just wanted to wrap up with and beneath the HAF executive director's tweet when she talked about when she had a go basically at Jasmeet Bains, saying basically tough, right, we won this battle. Of course, a load of Hindutva and Hindu extremists and Hindu nationalists comments after. I read through them, and it really, you could feel your blood boiling as you read these comments. You're thinking, God, good heavens, these are just absolute. It's shocking. But I just picked out a few that were printable. Because, again, it just gives an insight into the typical mindset of the average Hindu, particularly the average Hindu nationalist. Krish Mathrani, for example, said, this victim mentality is so embarrassing for them. Well, I'm going to immediately pick up on that first sentence. Who is claiming as the victim here? It's not the Sikhs, actually. Well, the Sikhs are claiming they are victims of this, but it's you lot, it's you Hindus that are claiming you're the victims. This is your argument. Your argument is that you're the victims. And yet you're turning this back saying, well, this victim mentality is so embarrassing for them. Their progressive agenda and attempts to gain sympathy for a non-existent problem. Really? If it's a non-existent problem, why was Gurpatwant Singh Panoon, for example, potentially assassinated? Why was Hardeep Singh Nijjar actually assassinated? Why are people in the Sikh community regularly being exploited by Indian organised crime and the Bishnoi gang? Why has the Bishnoi gang just been declared a terrorist organisation, etc., etc., etc.? So you claim this person actually believes there is a non-existent problem. So he says that it's genuinely repulsive. It reflects a similar tactic employed by many other progressive minorities to garner attention, etc., etc. So again, that whole comment, just that mindset is actually quite shocking. It's concerning that somebody genuinely thinks that. And the next comment says, translation, we will keep targeting Hindus. So again, this victim mentality saying that we as a Hindu community are being attacked. We are under attack by these Khalistani terrorists. 1984 was done by Congress, not the current government, and there was the shifting the blame. They're saying, look, no, that 1984 attack, it was done by a small minority. It was Congress. It was nothing to do with the current government. In other words, transnational oppression doesn't exist. It's this complete mindset that the Sikh community are making this up. Stop drawing false parallels and targeting Hindus. Again, we're the victims here. They say the Hindus are the victims. And then the comment here that actually makes me laugh. Do some constructive work for America instead. I dare say that if you actually analyse the proportion of contribution that the Sikh community have done in America compared to every other Indian diaspora, I think you'll probably find that the Sikhs have actually contributed an awful lot more to American society than probably any other member of the Indian diaspora. So I think I'd think twice about that comment. Then it is the duty of Hindu Americans to primarily defeat this Khalistani radical. Khalistanis pose a bigger danger to Hindus as compared to jihadis and evangelists. So this person actually believes that the Khalistanis are a greater danger than Islamic extremists, who we know all over the world pick up guns and bombs and attack their fellow human beings. So this person is equating Khalistan campaigners with Islamic jihadists. Forget India. If American Hindus are to breathe easy, Khalistanis must be kept out of any seat of power. And then the final comment I picked up, again, Trivedi, Brahmanical name. 4 million American Hindus can help the United States and humanity get rid of Khalistani terrorists. All this, just to wrap up as a final comment, it's very clear. And these people, and to be as generous as I can to these people, they have formed their opinions by the information that they have been fed. We all form our opinions by what we read, what we hear, what we see. So these people have been fed a narrative that has come from India, a narrative that has been very carefully procured and shaped and moulded to influence the average Hindu, these sorts of people. It's very easy to be quite brutal about these people, but the bottom line, the reality of these people, they're just sheep. That is what they are. They have formed these comments, these opinions, because this is what they have been told. And blindly, they have believed it. And this is why we, people like Satluj TV, need to exist to remind people, stop being a sheep. Think for yourself. Start asking some questions. Look at the facts on the ground. Don't believe everything that you are told, everything that you see or hear or read. Think for yourself, do a little bit of research. Again, James, back to your wonderful piece on misinformation, disinformation, and malign information. Get out there. Don't believe everything you read. Try and do a bit of effort and get out and try and dig out the truth. And that's why more people need to watch people like us, James.
You know, and I always wonder how you can trust anybody with tattoos on their face. That sheep looks mischievous, I'll tell you. But I do think that I've seen that sheep before. I think it was one of those paparazzi cameras that caught Modi on a date. Well, let's turn back seriously, though, Angus, is that the SB 509 was an important piece of legislation and an important tool to not only protect the transnational repression in the U.S. by the Indian government, it also reaches the diasporas that are from Russia, Iran, Israel, China. I mean, the tools in themselves were so vital for many communities. And for the Hindu extremists or the Hindutva to turn around and say that it was just targeting them is ridiculous. The transnational repression, when you look at the international threats that are out there and the reality and the evidence is overwhelming. And that is why I think that it's asinine to not sign this, not make it law, not bring it in as a new bill that would protect Californians. And let's face it, if the US government at a federal level was going to take action, it would not be in contravention of the California Acts. They would work together. There's the federal regulations and laws, and then you have state regulations and laws. And in closing on that argument is that if the federal government was unable to move forward with different prosecutions or investigations due to the limitations of those laws, there are times that state governments proceed with whether it's criminal charges or investigations when the federal government feels that their hands are tied. The state government and the state prosecutors or the state law enforcement can move in and be a stopgap. And I think that's what's going to be missed here.
Indeed. So as Jasmine Baines says, the fight continues. We will not give up on this. And best of luck to the community in California. Certainly, I have no doubt they will be back with a vengeance on the next piece of legislation. But we will prevail. We will prevail. And best of luck to California on that. But we're running out of time now, so we need to rush through our comments as always, sadly. And I'm going to start with this is actually dipped into Substack. There's a really great comment came from the Sikh Civil Defence Association. This is a really interesting point. And I wanted to pick up this point because it does raise a lot of questions. Basically, to paraphrase this comment, it basically says, look, instead of assuming that issues will be automatically resolved with the formation of Khalistan, we need to ask ourselves, if Sikh ideals are not being practiced with current Sikh organisations advocating for Khalistan, can we trust these organisations, political or otherwise, to address these issues effectively if they gain power? This is all to do about discrimination based on ancestry, caste, basically. So again, it's all about discrimination within our society, our hierarchies, let's call it. And so the point basically says is that when we establish Khalistan, it can only succeed if the bodies that are running that run the nation actually do follow the. Let me find the words that he uses because he actually uses some very clever words in here. Basically, in practice, are open to there it is. Sikh leadership. Reflecting diverse demographics, young, old, male, female, Punjabi, non-Punjabi, etc., within the Panth. These organisations will earn the trust of everyone in Punjab. In other words, Sikh leadership, and again, that's it, Sabat Dabala, wellness for all. This is, we're learning a bit more Punjabi here, James. So this wellness for all, basically, Sabat Dabala, it comes back to that fundamental principle, we are all equal, we're all born equal, we all must live equally, and everybody will be treated equally. If all the organisations within Khalistan are built upon that same principle, it will succeed and people will follow it. If it's not, if there is any form of hierarchy, it's always very difficult to avoid hierarchies. They exist naturally amongst us all. But ultimately, obviously, there must be no caste system, and I can't believe there would be. But ultimately, and I think this point is absolutely right, is so important that all the organisations that are established follow this principle of Sabat Dabala, James. It makes sense, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I've noticed the Sikh Civil Defence Association quite active on our Substack. So thank you to them for chiming in. I've seen some other great comments that they put in, and as well as Stay Safe, one of our regular commenters as well on there. So it shows that the information is getting out there, ladies and gentlemen, and we thank all of our viewers for spreading the word and remind you to keep doing that and help us to get our message out there to a broader audience through your likes, your follows, your shares, and most of all, your comments like this that are well thought out and articulated here.
Yeah, great comment. Thanks for that. Next set, K Singh. Jagtar Singh Johal. He's a Sikh and not a Jew, so the conduct of the British and Canadian governments is boringly predictable. Absolutely. I think this highlights an issue that certainly we have here in the UK. I think less so in Canada, but certainly in the UK, because Jagtar Singh Johal is a Sikh and not a Jew. If he was a Jew, the British government would have moved heaven and earth to release him. Likewise, if he was probably a Muslim, the same. For some reason, the British government have got it in for our British Sikhs. And Jagtar Singh Johal has been abandoned by the British government because he's a Sikh. And clearly, the British government doesn't care. I don't know if it'll be the same in Canada, James.
I don't think so, Angus. And I would actually, I look at that as a different viewpoint in the fact that I don't think it's more about religion or faith. I think it's more about the dollar. And that's what it comes down to is that they are working so hard to appease the India government and try not to ruffle feathers while they are trying to get these trade agreements done and trying to get a lot of benefit derived from that relationship. So that's how I view it anyway. But at the end of the day, they are failing people like Jaggi.
Indeed, and the next comment from Satbachan Singh is this is a good point, an important point. Reminds us that well, Jesus Christ was actually born Jewish, but he broke away and he created effectively the Christian faith. And likewise, it reflects what happened with the first Guru, Guru Nanak Dev Ji, who likewise he was born into a Hindu family, but he followed his own path. He created his own religion, as it turned out. He is the father of Sikhism because he rejected the prevailing feelings. He said, no, they are not fair. The caste system is inherently evil. He could see it for what it was. So he was not afraid to break away and say, no, I'm going to carve my own path and follow my own moral principles. And from that was born the Sikh religion. And I think this is again, it's a message to all of us going forward, is follow your principles, follow your moral principles, and don't be influenced by those around you, James.
And that must have been a difficult thing for him to do, to follow that moral compass, because let's face it, back at that time, it wasn't as it is today. You don't have the online crowds to support you, to make you feel like you are moving in the right direction. That must have been quite the challenge. And it just shows the dedication and the bravery that he had to stand alone at some point to start building that base of followers.
Indeed, and Think and Unite. I want to spend a bit of time with this comment. We'll run out of time. You have stupid Sikhs join the UK Army, stupid and shameful. No, it's not. And I think, and I want to pay tribute, as I always do, to the British Sikhs who've joined the British Army and served with absolute distinction currently and massively in the past. It is not stupid to join the British Army. Don't reject this nation of Great Britain. British Sikhs serve our nation both in the army and outside. They contribute massively to our nation because they see themselves as British. Yes, they are Sikhs, but they're also British. And it is not wrong to join the British Army. Likewise in the US or Canada, is that Sikhs, I would never ever dissuade Sikhs to join their national armies because they have so much to contribute, and it sends such a powerful message about what the Sikh community is and its contribution towards their host society, James.
Absolutely. And I like to honor and respect all of the troops, no matter where they are from. Let's face it, without the Sikhs or the soldiers of the past and the present, we would have no future. And that is something I truly believe in. So I have nothing but steadfast respect for those who do go into the armed forces.
Indeed. So I find it quite sad reading that comment. I totally understand where it's coming from, the British establishment, but yeah, well, anyway, we don't have time to, unfortunately, unpack that as we should do. Softer Muffins, RSS and the Taliban are united from the Mahabharata and never let the world in peace and harmony. In other words, there is this connection. In fact, Stay Safe follows it up as well. There is a deep connection between the Taliban, the Afghan rulers, and the Indian government. I refer many people to podcasts I've done in the past with Bhajan Singh Binder. We've actually gone into great detail about this, about these deep links between Afghanistan. It all actually goes back to the Soviet Union, the times of the Soviet Union. And there's a huge, all sorts of evidence that's emerged about these ties. Ultimately, there was a coup planned in the mid-1970s in Pakistan, General Zia, to take control of Pakistan and bridge the Soviet Union all the way down to India. Indira Gandhi, unsurprisingly, involved in that as well. But watch my podcast for that. And as Stay Safe reminds us, is that, just after Keir Starmer visited Narendra Modi, who did Narendra Modi host? Yeah, the Taliban in Delhi again. So these connections run deep, James. It speaks volumes, particularly when we parallel, as Stay Safe has, how the Taliban treats its women and how India treats its women, James.
Absolutely. And, you look at the disparities when it comes to education, human rights, any of these things that you see where people are discriminated against, whether it's women, whether it's minorities. It's all a sham that's based on a caste system that also was influenced by Russia. And today we still see that connection between India and Russia when it comes to politics.
We certainly do. And then, James, ice hockey in Canada. Clearly we have ice hockey fans in the house, James.
Yes.
Well, Mo Gruel says, Chardy colour, Angus and James. Great explanation, a pleasure. Well, Chardy colour to our wonderful audience. You guys are doing a wonderful job. Keep it up. Well, we can only keep it up if you guys are there helping us and contributing. So keep your comments coming in. M. Verdi finishes off with, may God, the supreme power, help Sikhs for achieving their homeland. We couldn't say it better, James. As we always do, Khalistan Zindabad.
Absolutely. And thanks for the amazing comments. Keep them coming. We love it.
Indeed we do. Thanks so much, but we're way over time as usual, so we must wrap things up. Do keep those comments coming in. Thank you so much for all of you who have contributed. Much appreciated. Don't forget you can message us directly at message@satellagestv.com if there's something you want to bring to our attention directly. But that's it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. It's a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
We'll see you next time.